Hey there. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. We're going to get started very soon. In the meantime, we encourage y'all to put your name and where you're joining from in the chat to the right, including if you know the name of the tribe or tribes who remain caretakers of the land you are now on. If you don't, please check out nativeland.ca. That address is also in the chat. See you in a minute. And I'll say that one more time. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. We are going to get started very soon. In the meantime, we encourage you to put your name and where you are joining from in the chat, including if you know the name of the tribe or tribes who remain caretakers of the land you are now on. If you don't know, please check out nativeland.ca. That address is also in the chat. People from all over. It's so exciting. We're doing the good things. And I think we're ready to get started. So I'm going to kick us off formally, but feel free to keep putting your name and your location and whatever else you need to put in the chat, including the tribe or tribes whose land you are now on. Okay. Hi. Hello, everyone. And thank you for joining the People's Hearing to Stop GTN XPress. I am Allison Carey, she, her, and I am a board member of Southern Oregon's Rogue Climate. I am your host tonight on behalf of the many individuals and organizations across the Northwest who don't want to see more fracked gas pushed through an old pipeline because it's wrong. Today, we are gathering from many places, most of them, as we know, stolen land. Rogue Climate is located within the ancestral homelands of the Shasta, Takelma, and Lagawa peoples who lived here since time immemorial. We acknowledge the violence and loss intrinsic in the creation of the governments that hold the decision-making power about this pipeline expansion. We also acknowledge, of course, that Indigenous peoples are still here and that Indigenous communities are leading the fights to repair the ecological and spiritual harms caused by extraction and colonization. From the fight for dam removal to save the salmon, Tuam, and Coptu, to the fight against pipelines, Jordan Cove, Keystone XL, Dakota Access, Line 3, and so many other essential efforts. On the screen, you can now see a map of the GTN XPress pipeline route, and that map identifies federally recognized tribal governments along the route. The route also impacts potentially other tribes as well. And so we wanted to give a full list of the tribes whose land this pipeline would further impact: the Modoc, Cayuse, Umatilla, Wasco, Paiute, Warm Springs, Walla Walla, Klamath, Yahuskin, Northern Paiute, Palouse, Spokane, Kalispell, Coeur d'Alene, Nez Perce, and likely others. That's a lot of land. So what are we doing tonight? Because the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, also known as FERC, as many of you know, did not offer a public hearing on this project, we're here today to have our own hearing, a people's hearing, because we would like the people to make the decisions. The testimony we will gather a little later tonight will be recorded and submitted to FERC for their consideration. It is unclear when FERC will be making the decision to approve or deny permits for the GTN XPress, but it could happen as soon as March 16th. So time is of the essence. So let's remind ourselves what's at stake. Here's a short film from Tikkun Olam Productions, which was filmed at several spots along the pipeline route by members of the fabulous Stop GTN XPress coalition. And we will start that video any minute now.
The destruction, climate change, and the fossil. Across the Pacific Northwest and the country, communities have seen the destruction, climate change, and the fossil fuel industry. And we've come together to say enough is enough. Over the last decade, we've beaten back projects like Jordan Cove LNG, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, Keystone XL, and the Dakota Access Pipeline. In the Northwest, people power has shut down coal plants, stopped LNG exports, and beat a proposed methanol refinery. Cities and states across the region are taking bold steps to transition off fossil fuels. We, the people, have been fighting back and winning.
New pipeline projects have become increasingly unpopular and easier to shut down. But now the fossil fuel industry is trying a new, sneakier tactic: pipeline expansion.
Companies like TC Energy are using this tactic to try and expand the capacity of existing pipelines, further putting our communities in harm's way. The GTN XPress expansion project is being rushed through the federal permitting process despite outcry from local, state, and federal officials and the communities this pipeline cuts through.
Now we need to use that people power to stop the GTN XPress expansion. If approved, this project would increase the amount of fracked gas flowing from British Columbia through Idaho, Washington, and Oregon by more than 3.47 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year. That would be the same as adding 754,000 cars on the road each year for the next 30 years. Not to mention the impacts a leak or explosion could have on nearby communities. The impacts are disastrous, and so is the company behind GTN XPress. TC Energy is notorious even among pipeline operators for their spills and safety record. They're the same company behind Keystone XL and the Keystone Pipeline, the same pipeline that just spilled 600,000 gallons of oil after increasing flow capacity, just like what they're proposing to do with the GTN XPress.
State attorney generals and senators are joining our fight and calling on FERC to stop this pipeline expansion. They filed comments arguing that the pipeline is incompatible with state climate goals, and it would be a burden on residents throughout 4 states.
To the people who live along the pipeline route, it's more than a burden. It's a major environmental, health, and safety risk. And to everyone else, it's still a ticking climate time bomb.
We're fighting to protect our communities for the long haul and stop the fossil fuel industry's attacks on communities like ours all over the country. We need your support.
So great. Thank you. In just a few minutes, I'll give you an overview of how we're going to spend the rest of our time together and logistics about getting testimony to FERC tonight or some other time and everything else. And if you have a burning question right then, before then, feel free to put it in the Q&A, which is down below my screen, and we'll try to get to it. We are still so glad you are all here. But first, to reinforce the importance of this issue, everything you heard in that video, everything we are going to learn tonight, it's my honor to introduce Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley. Since 2009, he has been one of the Senate's foremost champions for protecting our environment and taking on climate change. He's won bipartisan support to boost the Green Climate Fund, has used his seat in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to promote American climate leadership on the global stage, has led the fight in the Senate against Arctic drilling, and introduced the Keep It in the Ground Act to completely end new fossil fuel leases on our federal lands and waters. Recently, Senator Merkley championed Senate letters urging President Biden to declare a national climate emergency, oppose Senator Manchin's permitting reform efforts, so-called permitting reform efforts, and calling on the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission not to approve the GTN XPress project. So he's got some things to say. All to you, Senator.
Allison, thank you so mentioned, we need people power to take on these projects. It's so much more effective to have voices, yes, in some, as many elected officials as possible. We need that outside voices to really make any sort of movement effective. And you've all been very effective. When I think about the broad picture, our big challenge with climate chaos is to quit burning fossil fuels. It's to electrify everything with renewable energy. But the last thing we should do is continue building more fossil fuel infrastructure. In doing so, we're not only creating infrastructure that will facilitate the burning of fossil fuels for a generation to come, we're also facilitating the donations that flow from that to corrupt our political system to keep supporting fossil fuels. And we are absolutely undermining our leadership in the world, or our partnerships in the world, because we can't tackle climate change by our own. It has to be in partnership with other countries. And it's very hard, I would say impossible, to go to another country, and virtually every country has a smaller per person footprint than we do, and say, hey, we're building more fossil fuel infrastructure, but please, you all don't do the same. Stop using your coal, stop using your oil, stop using your fracked methane gas. But, oh, by the way, we're going to keep doing it. And it's in that context that this project is so wrong. It's wrong because it amplifies the amount of fossil fuels that will be consumed and burned and add to the atmosphere, and it undermines our partnership and working with the rest of the world. So the FERC needs to hear from all of you, and thank you for holding this hearing. This is an unnecessary and it's an unwanted project. It does the opposite of what we're trying to achieve in Oregon and Pacific Northwest for our climate objectives, to contribute to the solutions, not to make the problem worse. We see in Oregon the effects of the climate changes. We see it in the longer, fiercer fire season. We see it in the smaller average snowpack. We see it in the droughts and the dropping groundwater levels that affect our ranchers and our farmers. We see it in the warmer, smaller streams that flow from the snowpack, which are bad for salmon and bad for trout. We see it in the acidification of the Pacific Ocean. In other words, you cannot go anywhere in Oregon and not see the impact. And now we're not talking just about warmer temperatures in cities. We're talking about hitting the fundamentals of our rural economy, our farming, our ranching, our fishing, our forestry. This project only makes things worse. It would increase the capacity of the pipeline by at least, well, the fancy name, 150,000 decatherms of fracked fossil gas per day. And you just heard that it will translate to the equivalent of adding, I think it was 750,000 more gas guzzling cars on the road. That is just an enormous impact. Here we are trying to transform transportation from the fossil world to the renewable world. And a single project like this, massive increase in the equivalent of the pollution that stems from it. FERC's own environmental impact statement says it's predicted to cost $9 billion in climate-related damage over the next 28 years. And that's using a methodology that systematically minimizes the impact. In fact, FERC says that they can't say exactly how the fossil methane gas is going to be used. They can't be factored into their decision-making. Well, listen, here's what we know. Higher pressure in the pipeline means more methane gas is going to leak out of the pipeline. And we know that doubling the amount of gas that goes through the pipeline means you're going to double the amount of gas that is burned, and therefore doubles the carbon dioxide impact. So of course, we have at least a ballpark understanding of the impact it will make. And for FERC to say, oh, we can't just say exactly, well, will it be used in a stove, or will it be used in a furnace? Will it be used to generate electricity? In any of those situations, it's burned and it produces carbon dioxide. This is evidence of a corrupted organization that will only change with the people power that all of us bring to bear on it. I can tell you that there is nobody in my blue collar community that if you double the amount of gas that burned, will will it have no impact? And they're like, well, of course, it'll double the impact. I mean, it's that clear. It's that obvious. So let's keep going forward with our determination here. This flew under the radar a bit because instead of a new pipeline, it's doubling the pressure in the existing pipeline. Doesn't matter. It's equivalent to doubling the capacity of the pipeline, doubling the damage. And we have to double down in our fight against it. So let's proceed to do exactly that through this people's hearing, through the follow-up comments to FERC, through every type of people action that we can organize and make happen. I am just honored to be in this fight with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Merkley. This technology doesn't let us easily hear applause, but there are hundreds of people here tonight. And I know that you know how important your leadership is both in this country and worldwide on this issue and so many others. You carry so many of us with you in your work every day. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you all for being champions in this most important fight.
Thank you. Okay. So the people's hearing is going strong. Let's talk about what comes next. We're going to briefly and fabulously hear from 6 more fabulous folks right up front. And thank you in advance to Audrey Leonard, Nachmana Shirazi, Dr. Anne-Marie Dooley, Peter McCartney, and Elke and Alicia Littleleaf, who are featured speakers this evening. Then we're going to a quick group exercise just to remind ourselves that we're all in this together and we can accomplish anything because we are all in this together. And then our final event will be your testimony for FERC, recording it. And we hope you're excited. If you're already signed up, we'll call on you and you'll have 2 to 3 minutes to just share with FERC and the folks on this call to speak from your own experience why you oppose GTN XPress and how this pipeline expansion would impact you and your family and your community. If you aren't already signed up, we're thrilled to add your testimony and record it now if we have time. And if not, we'll also let you know how you can still make FERC hear your voice. And there will be tips on content in the chat throughout the time we have together. So now basic, simple housekeeping stuff, Q&A. If you have questions about GTN XPress throughout the event, you are welcome to post them in the Q&A section, which is down below, different from the chat. Although both are down below, they start down below. You know what I mean? We've been doing this a while. And we will be doing our best to answer those questions about GTN XPress because we have experts standing by. And if we don't get to one, we welcome you to reach out after the event to any of the organizations that are represented in this coalition. And then the chat. We're also going to be doing our best to answer questions, especially if you're like, my Zoom, what's happening? We're happy to help. And also, of course, that's a great place to share your thoughts and reactions because obviously what we're talking about is big and it's got a lot of big emotions and a lot of big hope. And we're going to have a lot of big success and have fun with the emoji response buttons as I see people are already doing. Okay, so moving on to our introductory speakers, I'd like to introduce Audrey Leonard. She, her, a staff attorney for Columbia Riverkeeper. She focuses on protecting the Columbia River from fracked gas, oil by rail, and other fossil fuel infrastructure. And she's here to share some of the dirty, dangerous details about this dirty, dangerous proposal. So Audrey, take it away.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
All right, so I'm just going to jump in with a little background on the project, and you heard a bit from the video, so I'll try to not be redundant there. GTN XPress. TC Energy, the company behind the Keystone XL and the Keystone pipelines, wants to expand the GTN pipeline that runs from British Columbia all the way through Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. And they're doing this by adding fracked gas to the pipeline. They're not building new segments of the pipeline. The main takeaway from today, what you're all going to walk home with today, is that our climate cannot afford to lock in more fossil fuels. So that's why we are fighting this dangerous proposal at multiple levels. Next slide, please. For those of you who are dying to know how they're proposing to do this, they are proposing what is called a compression update. So as the gas moves down the pipeline, it slows down because it incurs friction and it's covering a lot of ground and elevation changes, which causes it to slow down and lose pressure. So compressor stations are these big industrial facilities like the one shown here. This one is in Kent, Oregon, and they're placed along the pipeline to reboost that pressure every 40 to 100 miles. Next slide, please. And why are we fighting this project? This number here in the corner is the one that you really need to hang on to. 3.47 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions every single year is what this project will add to our atmosphere. Our region is rapidly moving away from reliance on fossil gas and towards cleaner energy sources like electrification. We expect demand for fossil gas to fall in the near future, and this project would lock our region into an additional 30 years of reliance on gas. And by putting this sort of money into the infrastructure for an upgrade like this, that places the burden on ratepayers who will end up paying the bill. And of course, by adding more gas into the system, that means more fracking waste, more air pollution, more water pollution, and a slower transition away from fossil fuels. Next slide. A little bit about the process that's happening here. Like we mentioned, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, also known as FERC, is in charge of approving or denying the project. And they released their environmental impact statement in November, but did not adequately analyze the environmental impacts of the project, including upstream emissions, which are the emissions from fracking and the emissions along the pipeline as it leaks, everything before that end use of combusting the gas. An important part of this process was in August when the attorneys general of Washington, Oregon, and California all spoke up to oppose the project. And the United States Environmental Protection Agency also has spoken up to tell FERC that the way that they're calculating these greenhouse gas emissions is actually far too conservative. And I would just want to give a quick shout out to the thousands of people, including I'm sure many of you here today, who have already signed petitions and submitted comments to FERC. Next slide. And finally, I just want to highlight that there were many individual tribal members across the region that have voiced opposition to this pipeline expansion. The Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, known as CRITFIC, includes the Yakima Nation, the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs, the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, and the Nez Perce Tribe. Here's an excerpt from their vital statement against the GTN XPress pipeline. The project will have significant and irreversible effects on the region. Importantly, the project is in direct conflict with the tribes and states' climate goals for reducing fossil fuels. If FERC had properly consulted with the tribes of the region, it would be informed of these conflicts, and it may have provided a robust analysis of potential impacts. FERC's environmental impact statement is inadequate, and CRITFIC recommends that FERC deny the certificate for the project. And we're going to be providing a link to their entire statement in the chat, along with the CRITFIC's energy plan as a resource for you all. And with that, I will pass it back to Allison. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thanks so much, Audrey. That was really great. I always learn when I hear you talk. I have my video off and I'm sorry. Great. So moving on, thank you again, Audrey, to share some insight focusing on the moral questions involved in this permitting decision. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Nachmana Shirazi. Nachmana Shirazi is an Earth Ministry Washington Interfaith Power and Light Board member, a community leader, activist, and member of Spokane Islamic Center. She works as the Climate Justice Program Director at the Spokane Lands Council, with Asian Pacific Islander Coalition, Spokane, as their community outreach and advocacy organizer, and as CEO of Muslims for Community Action and Support. She believes in policy work based on community and strives to bring underrepresented and marginalized voices to the forefront. Welcome.
Thank you, Allison. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Peace be upon you all. Good evening. And as you can tell, I never sleep. I'm just a vampire. So we'll just gloss over that fact and continue with what I'm going to talk about. My name is Nahmana Shirazi, and I'm joining you tonight from the unceded lands of the Spokanese, Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai, and Colville people. Time and again, faith communities across Washington have come together to stop new fossil fuel projects, including 6 new proposed coal export terminals and what would have been the world's largest fracking gas to methanol refinery. The GTN XPress fracked gas pipeline expansion proposal is just the latest project that fossil fuel companies have tried to sneak past us. Faith communities in Spokane County know that frack gas is not faithful and that it is immoral to expand the GTN Express pipeline in a time when we need to decrease our reliance on fossil fuels. My son was a Boy Scout and 13 years old when we researched what fracking meant. I was appalled to read about all the negative impacts fracking causes, and mainly on indigenous lands. I hate it. Just last spring, I advocated all summer to help pass some of the strongest building codes in the nation in Washington state, which will soon require the new residential and commercial buildings must be built with electric heat pumps, space and water heating. TC Energy may claim there is demand for more fracked gas in the Pacific Northwest, but the truth is we are all well on our way as a state to building an infrastructure for all Washingtonians without gas. We need to diversify our energy sources. We know that continuing to rely on fracked gas warms our planet and puts our neighbors, both in Spokane and around the world, in danger. Here in Spokane, we know something about caring for our neighbors. I have lived and worked in Spokane for 10 years now and have been lucky to build a wonderful community around me. My work as Climate Justice Program Director for the Lands Council, which is the longest standing conservation group in the Inland Northwest, as Community Outreach and Advocacy Organizer for Asian Pacific Islander Coalition Spokane, also known as APIC, and my work with communities of color and mainly immigrants and refugees as CEO of MCAS, Muslims for Community Action and Support, and on the board of Refugees and Immigrant Connection Spokane, among others, have been instrumental in forming coalitions and partnerships across the state. I am representing a lot of people and not just in Spokane here. As you can see from the slide currently being shown, the pipeline passes through densely populated areas of Spokane County. This is such a huge hazard. This is an aging pipeline, over 60 years old. Who knows what will happen if we continue to push the volume up? As a Muslim, it is incumbent upon me to take care of my neighbors, to walk humbly on this earth, and to leave it in better condition than I found it. This is why I built a community around me, got involved in local government so I could make my voice and my values heard in all the places that I can. As a Muslim, I am directed to take care and better my environment, the wildlife and my community. Yes, wildlife too, and my community. Something happens, our wildlife will be affected as well. The water table, all these things will be affected. I do this not just because of my religion, but because I want to leave a better world for my progeny. As a mother, as an immigrant, and all my other intersectionalities, I urge you to write to FERC and ask 5 other folks to do the same. Just 5. I'm sure you can manage that. Thank you for being with us here tonight.
And thank you for being here tonight. That was great. And that 5 people, that's a good idea. And then when you're done with 5, maybe push for 10, but take Nahmana's advice. Thank you, Nahmana, for joining us tonight. Next up is Anne-Marie Dooley, a nephrologist and climate activist based in Bellevue. She initially came to the United States from Ireland to work as a software engineer, but changed careers to medicine because access to healthcare is an essential human right. After finishing medical school at UC Davis, Anne-Marie completed internal medicine residency and a nephrology fellowship at the UW. At the same time, she completed a master's at the UW School of Public Health. She joined WPSR in order to promote direct action and raise awareness on the catastrophic effects on human health from our climate crisis, because she understands that people cannot be healthy when their environment is unhealthy. Thank you, Dr. Dooley. Welcome.
Good evening. You know, I was thinking that social responsibility, when you heard all my training history there, social responsibility is not really something that's taught in medical schools, but you learn it the first week of seeing patients, because tonight we know that social responsibility begins where failed public policy ends. It steps in when failed health policy puts people in the hospital because they've no access to healthcare. It makes up for failed housing policy that puts families out onto the street to get sick because they don't have a roof over their heads. And tonight we know it substitutes for failed federal regulatory policy that allows a corporation like TC Energy to build and expand a pipeline that I know will lead to more people getting sick and possibly more premature deaths. Now, you might think I'm opposed to pipelines because I'm a doctor, and that's true because fossil fuels probably are associated with 50,000 premature deaths a year in the United States, which is a pretty high number. And that's true. And 700 billion in healthcare costs a year. But no, actually, it's more personal than that for me, because as you heard, I grew up in the west of Ireland in a community that was powered by fossil fuels. In my case, I was lighting coal fires every night, sending billows of smoke into the house and beyond. And then when people started getting sick, they said, well, use clean coal. And I can tell you, there's no such thing as clean coal any more than there's such a thing as what TC Energy calls clean burning natural gas. Next slide. Because methane gas, from where it's extracted to where it's stored to where it's processed and then finally burned, releases all sorts of chemicals you can see from the slide. Sulfur dioxide, nitrogen, small particulate matter. When inhaled into the lungs for people who are living close by methane gas infrastructure, get transmitted into the bloodstream, go to the heart and every other organ in the body. So they're associated with increases in lung disease, heart disease, and cancers. Now, I couldn't even go through the number of studies. It's over 100 that have been published linking methane gas infrastructure with all sorts of diseases. One I show on the slide was a study in Pennsylvania on fracked gas wells that showed that people with heart failure end up in the hospital much more often than people who live further away. And then there was another really more disturbing study that showed that kids that live closer, within 2 kilometers of fracked gas infrastructure, end up developing leukemia at much higher rates, phenomenally higher rates, 200 to 300% higher, which couldn't just be really by chance. And then there's these compressor stations that you've already heard about. You know, compressor stations, and they're building a new one, release all sorts of the same chemicals into the air, sulfur, nitrogen, volatile organic compounds that cause all sorts of problems and lead to poor health and as I've mentioned, premature deaths. So I would say to members of the Federal Regulatory Commission tonight, and indeed to people who work at TC Energy, what's an acceptable number of chronic illness and deaths for people living near this infrastructure? And then I would say to them, what's an acceptable number for your family, your partner, your son, and your daughter? And I would think the number quickly becomes 0. And if we hold the health of other people the same as our family, we shouldn't be allowing permitting for this expansion of this pipeline. And we certainly shouldn't be allowing it to be built. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dooley. That is a lot of very chilling information, and it's very important that you shared it with us tonight. Our next speaker, Peter McCartney, is joining us from British Columbia, where he works for Wilderness Committee as the climate campaigner. He makes regular field trips to northeastern BC to meet with local folks and document the impacts of fracking on land, water, and communities Peter is working with the new Frack Free BC Alliance to end fracking in the province forever. Thank you for being here, Peter.
Hey, thank you for the introduction. And I just want to thank Anne-Marie. It's kind of emotional to know, you meet with these families who live in Northeast BC, and to know that folks at the other end of the pipeline care about their health is just fills my heart. So thank you for sharing everything that you shared about the health impacts. So my name is Peter. I am the climate campaigner for the Wilderness Committee. I'm calling in from Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish territory in what's now known as Vancouver, British Columbia. And I'm here to talk about, what the reality looks like on the ground at the other end of the pipeline in northeastern British Columbia, in Deneta and Dunazah territory, which I visited. I try and get up every year for the past 5 or 6 years. And it would, the GTN XPress pipeline would require 660 new gas wells in northeastern British Columbia by the middle of the century, by 2050. And so thank you all for being here and for doing what you're doing to help stop this project, because it really does affect the impacts that people are seeing in communities and on the landscape in northeastern BC. So next slide. This is a active fracking operation just along the Peace River. For folks that don't know what fracking is or where the gas comes from that would be flowing through GTN XPress, it's a process used to extract gas from shallow rock beds deep underground. In BC, it's called the Montney Formation, where where fracking companies would be getting this gas. And they use a tremendous amount of water, silica sand that's a known carcinogen and mined from the prairies, and then mix it full of toxic chemical cocktail under really high pressure. And they pump it underground so that it shatters open the rock deep below the earth, fills it with water, and that pushes the methane gas up into the well where fracking companies can retrieve it. It's hard to describe just the amount of impacts to the land in northeastern British Columbia. The gas industry there covers an area 5 times the size of Alberta's tar sands mines. But of course, it's spread over an area, 2/3 the size of Washington State. And so we don't see, they don't have quite the same impact. But from the air, you can really get a sense of just how much of the landscape has been taken over by this industry. Next slide. So this is animations of fracking in the Peace region of British Columbia over the last 20 years. You can basically see this anywhere in the Montney gas basin. Like I mentioned, an area 2/3 the size of Washington State. And the Blueberry River First Nations, whose territory this is, one of several Treaty 8 nations, recently sued the provincial government for violating their treaty rights, because 84% of their territory is actually within half a kilometer, which is about the same 500 yards of an industrial disturbance. And so, they're not unable to practice their culture on the land when it has been this heavily impacted. And you can see, access roads, seismic lines, pipelines, well pads, wastewater ponds, processing plants, compressor stations. That is what all of these little markings all over these animated images show. Next slide, please. I mentioned the amount of water that the industry uses. It's over 5 billion liters of water, or about 1.3 billion gallons every year from nearby lakes and rivers. And the industry plans to double that if they get their way. All of this water is poisoned with toxic chemicals. They pump it underground, and then it's disposed of untreated. It's the only industry in British Columbia where we just let them dump their water without doing anything to remove the toxins in it. and they barely even pay for the privilege. The entire gas industry's water rent for British Columbia was only $8,000 in 2021. It got to the point where last fall I was up in October, and fracking operations actually had to cease because the rivers were running so low that they weren't able to maintain the health of fish and all of the gas drilling that was going on in northeastern BC. And so, that's an impact on the landscape from the amount of water that they're taking up, but it's also an impact of the climate pollution that these companies are continually putting into the air, and obviously causing more drought. And so why fracking is so bad for the climate is the gas that they're fracking for. It's methane gas. Because of the shape of the molecule, it is 86 times more, traps 86 times more heat than carbon dioxide over its lifetime in the atmosphere. And so what that means is it warms the climate much faster than other fossil fuels. And indeed, it's been responsible for about a quarter of the warming that we've seen so far. And methane gas escapes from fracking at every step of the process. You have improperly sealed wells or the crack over time, leaking methane into the atmosphere, what they call incomplete combustion in flare stacks. When these big flare stacks are going off, it doesn't burn the methane completely, and so that leaks into the atmosphere. They actually have valves in a lot of their equipment that are designed to just vent this gas into the atmosphere, and then on storage tanks, whenever the temperature changes enough, they put this stuff out, and on their compressor stations, actually, just like the ones on the pipeline route, improper seals cause a tremendous amount of methane leakage. So this is a huge problem for the climate, and the world has recognized that we need to tackle methane emissions imminently in order to maintain a safe level of global warming. And what these, you don't do that by increasing the amount of fracking in northeastern BC. And even if we could eliminate methane leaks completely, gas demand still has to decline 3% every year in order to meet the world's climate commitments. So these climate disasters that we're seeing, just like south of the border, we've seen torrential rains, wildfires, smoke choking out our cities. They just keep getting worse until we stop burning fossil fuels. And that's why we need to stop the GTN XPress pipeline and end fracking in British Columbia to actually transition off of fossil fuels and preserve a safe climate for future generations and for current generations too. So thank you all so much for all of the work that you're doing, and I hope that the FERC will hear your pleas to stop this pipeline. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Allison Carey, I'm here, but I think my video has been stopped. Well, that's good because we can spend more time with the slide. Next up, I'll just keep talking. So next up, and thank you so much, Peter. There I am. Hi, everybody. I'm back. Our next speakers are Elke and Alicia Littleleaf, members of the Warm Springs tribe, fishing guides, water protectors, and longtime fossil fuel watchdogs, and a very important responsibility. They're joining us from an area not far from the proposal to expand the compressor station near Kent, Oregon, and the GTN pipeline route, which cuts through lands where the Warm Springs tribe has lived since time immemorial. Thank you, Elke and Alicia.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you for having us. And hi, I would like to just introduce ourselves. I'm Alicia and my husband's Elke, and we're the first and only married Indigenous duo in the United States that run an outfit called a fly fishing outfit called Littleleaf Guide Service. And I would like to first of all say that we're here as concerned tribal members, and that we would we're here on the behalf of kind of what Criffit says with the Treaty of 1855, and we would like those to be honored. And we've fossil fuels in the past with the Tesoro Savage oil terminal. We've opposed that. We've opposed a natural gas pipeline that was trying to come on our reservation through the Shears Falls and under the Deschutes River. And then at the time it was called Trail West or Palmer Trail West. It went through a few name changes. Regardless whether it was tabled or not, we opposed them and said, you know, this is our livelihood. This is our way of life. We live off the land in a sense still with our guide service as tribal members. We harvest our first foods. We give back in many ways, and we have to be able to sustain ourselves as indigenous and as tribal members. And again, we're Warm Springs tribal members, but we're also descendants of Yakima Nation, and my husband is Nimipu from the Nez Perce, correct? And
Yes.
they say Nimipu. And so, you know, we always do this as concerned tribal members first and foremost, and we are a voice for the voiceless, because I don't like to say words like natural resources, because it's our way of life. The water, it produces everything that we live off of: the roots, the celery, the salmon, the sturgeon, the eel. The list is so extensive. The smelt, I mean, I don't even want to get started on all the things that are going extinct and how small they are and everything, but I have to, because we're affected. We see it, you know, every day. We live it, and we just can't sit back and act like nothing's going on when these pipelines try to slip in your backyard and under your, you know, the Columbia River Gorge, for crying out loud. That's where we're from. We're from Celilo Falls. We're 100 miles away from where we're from, but we're still in that area. Our ancestors are still there. We are still here. I'll leave a little meat on the bones for my husband.
Yes, on a historical note of our existence, our ways, is these pipelines are just like another stab in our hearts. You know, we had to live through the genocidal ways of our reservation life, and we're breaking that system, and it's hard. You know, it's hard just living in our society what we have today. But now we have to fight just for our you know, our roots, our berries, our huckleberries. We have to speak for our animals. We have to speak for our fish. There's so many reputations that threaten our way like that. I mean, how could they replace our traditions, our customs, if they're destroyed? And what I mean by destroyed is, like, if one of those pipelines bursted into a fire and we have these dry conditions as we had these last few years, just think of how those fires have been running without adequate help. We've been lacking help quite a bit. That's why all these fires, these smoke's been becoming more and more a normal type thing, and it's disheartening to see that. And I could see the threats, especially having a background working in the field with fabrication, metal. I used to weld. I used to work on a railroad as a maintenance engineer with my father. I was a machinist. I could keep going on, and I've had to work on many types of machinery, and to have a pipeline run through our areas like that, I wouldn't risk it for my own life. I would not risk it at all, because I know in the end, it's like gambling, because we're going to lose on that way. There's always something that's going to disrupt our lives. And that pipeline is something that's like a weapon. It's just waiting to get the trigger pulled, and it'll take a certain thing to happen. You know, it could be an earthquake, it could be a flood. What about terrorists? How are they going to protect those pipelines from terrorists? I mean, there's too much at stake. We could go on and on all day on all these problems, but once again, how can they replace our traditions and our culture if these areas are threatened with destruction? Why do we have to keep fighting for what little we have left? We've already had to lose our lands and many traditions and customs, but for real, we need to pull together and start thinking right in unity and stop all these threats that threaten our lands, our waters, our fish, our foods. We hardly have game anymore. Our roots are getting small, our huckleberry is getting small. We're seeing drought conditions in our own Oregon. I mean, this ain't the way to keep it green. We got to represent for what we speak for. And me and my wife are proud to be here, and we speak for our ancestors, our animals, our fish, our roots, our berries. That's our way of life. And thank you.
And also, we've opposed the No DAPL pipeline. We went clear down to Standing Rock to stand with our brothers and sisters and oppose that threat. This is all of our duty, not just in our areas, but everywhere in the United States, Canada, all of us, we're all sisters and brothers. We're all linked, we're all connected. We all share a common thing, and that's water. Water is life. So please, let's keep it clean. We need that water. We need clean water. We need clean air. We need clean everything for future generations to come.
For our children's children.
And I forgot to introduce myself as Klikump. That's my native name. It's for the Cascades. And my grandfather. And I need to introduce myself that way. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for that extra introduction, and thank you, Elke and Alicia, for taking the time to be with us today and sharing your love together. It's so cool. And of course, all the other love and work and belief that you give the world. So that is the end of our planned featured panelists tonight. Thank you, as I said to Senator Merkley, to all of you. It's very hard to find applause. It's very hard to see the stunned and moved and overwhelmed and full of belief faces that you have brought to the people here tonight. And so I thank you, because I know there is all the applause and all the appreciation and all the emotion that you and your work inspires and your lived experience inspires. So thank you. So we're going to do that collective exercise now. So everybody turn on your, if you have a listening brain on, you can turn on a different part of your brain, and it's called Menti. And here we go. To the communities who live along the pipeline route, those who are already facing the impacts of climate change and bearing the risk of these fossil fuel projects, the risks of this proposal are just too great. Those of you joining us today from across the region and across the world, you have your own stories and reason for opposing this project. And we want to hear from you, all the hundreds of people who are gathered in person and on Zoom. So here's the question that we want to ask all of you. What inspires you to keep fighting against fossil fuel projects like GTN XPress? So to give your one-word response, please accept the Menti app request, which is right there on your screen. You can see it. I hope it's there. I can see it. Or you can visit www.menti.com and use the code on the screen. That is on the screen now, 4120-0789, to submit your feedback that way. Okay, so we'll give everybody a minute. Get your typing fingers all ready. Tell us, share your inspiration with us, because, you know, we all need to work and we all need to share that inspiration with one another. Thanks. Nice work, getting the words, getting the inspiration. And I like it if you don't want to bother with the app, we're seeing it in the chat, so thank you. We'll give another minute. Seeing a lot of things that are kind of popping up as very similar, which is just reflects how powerful this fight is and how connected we all are, and how much our experience of this how much they're common experiences shared by humanity as we move through this struggle. Yeah, Maddie, it is beautiful, isn't it? I love watching it grow. All creatures great and small, for sure. Okay. Thank you, everybody. That is very beautiful. It's too hard to open up the chat for everybody to yell at their favorite thing, but you're all looking at on the screen, as am I. And you see so many words, some big, some small. I love the colors. Community, future, children, nature, solidarity, grandson, responsibility, interconnectedness. And just know you will have a record of this, and maybe we can send it out to folks too, so that you can carry this little bit of your inspiration along with you as you go through your day, and or print it out, put it in your pocket, so you have it with you everywhere you go. Thank you. Okay, so now we will be shifting to the public testimony part of our event. Remember, FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, has not held a hearing on this proposal. So we're, as we have mentioned, holding one ourselves with you. This is the people's hearing. All of the testimonies will be recorded and submitted to FERC. If you would like to provide testimony to FERC tonight and you've already signed up, you've already registered, we're going to put up a slide of who we think you are. If you're on that list and don't want to testify, you're like, I changed my mind, let us know, and no worries. You can let us know in the chat. And also, if you want to give testimony and haven't already registered, you can raise your hand and we will add as many folks to the list as we can. We won't necessarily have a slide for that, but I will be calling on folks. So listen for your name, and no pressure. There's no rush. This isn't a government hearing. This is a people's hearing. So you take your time, you make yourself comfortable. That's what we're here for. We're here to speak from our hearts and from our brains and from our truth. So anyway, again, listen for your name. We will be ending at 7 p.m. And if you haven't had a chance to speak by then, we will also have ideas about how you can still make your voice heard. And of course, always and above everything else, take care of yourselves and your family. If you have to leave at any point, of course, you take our thanks with you. And we will be in touch, and we always hope you will be in touch with us. So what I'm going to do is read out 3 names at a time of speakers. So the first 3 speakers, and don't start yet, but the first 3 speakers for the evening are Tom and Diana Gordon, and on deck is Ann Turner, then Lois Hoffler. So the first 3 names, Tom and Diana Gordon, Ann Turner, and Lois Hoffler. And I hope I'm saying your name right, Lois. And if I'm not, I apologize. So this is very exciting. We're going to start when it is your turn. And Tom and Diana are going to be the brave ones to get it started. Our tech folks will give you the technical Zoomy permission to speak and share your video. So overview, we are asking that people try and keep their testimony to about 2 minutes each. And I will give you a gentle reminder to start wrapping up your comments right about 2 minutes. And that's only, as you can imagine, just so we can hear from as many people as possible. And so if I gave you the gentle nudge, we hope you'll wrap up soon after that. And of course, common sense. We ask you to be thoughtful in your testimony, and we know you all will be. But if we get any hateful language against individuals or groups, we're going to step over and move on. And the other thing to keep in mind is, since we're hosting the hearing, is that we can make it fun and human and interactive. So as folks are sharing their testimony tonight, please feel free to use the chat to share your thoughts, reaction, and what resonates with you. And like I said before, you can use emojis. We have a lot of emoji users tonight, which is awesome. And what else should I say? I think we're there. So, Tom and Diana Gordon, I hope you're here. I think you are. And you are about to be on screen. Tech.
All right, folks, just a quick tech note. As we're calling you up to share your testimony, I'm going to make a request that you join as panelists. So Tom and Diana, if you could accept the request to become a panelist, then we will be able to see you. And while we are waiting for that, let's actually start with our next person.
Okay,
I'm
so
going to-
Ann Turner.
Right.
Ann. Hi, Ann.
Hi.
All right, you're
Hi.
on. Thank you so
I'm
much. Have a
on,
beautiful
okay.
2 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you so much. So my name is Dr. Ann Turner, and I'm a retired physician and a member of Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility. I strongly oppose this GTN XPress project, and I will speak as a physician to the devastating health impacts of gas or methane from fracking, secondly, from leaky pipes and venting at compressor stations, and thirdly, from burning methane, all of which disproportionately affect tribal, minority, rural, and low-income communities. So first, fracking, as you've heard from other speakers, gas in the GTN pipeline is extracted by fracking in Canada and British Columbia, where it results in environmental degradation that includes contamination of soil, water, and air by these toxic chemicals injected into the earth. And these fracking wells are located in vulnerable communities, and in this case on tribal lands, violating tribal rights. The health impacts in communities where fracking occurs includes increased rates of birth defects, cancer, and asthma. And secondly, pipelines by their very nature leak. And numerous studies have found that they leak about twice as much as they are generally reported. And TC Energy proposes to increase its capacity by increasing the amount of gas in existing pipelines by expanding compressor stations. And these compressor stations emit significant amounts of air pollutants from the operation of the engine, which powers the pump, as well as from venting. So when the pressure in the pipelines exceeds levels meant to ensure safety by not creating dangerous pressure in the pipeline, the contents of the pipeline are intentionally vented directly into the air. And they not only vent methane, but volatile organic compounds, particulate matter, nitrogen dioxide, and carbon monoxide, to name a few. And all of these air pollutants have serious health impacts, including increased risks of stroke, cancer, asthma, low birth weight, and premature births. And they also produce significant noise pollution. And also they're located in areas prone to wildfires, and not only that, they are at risk for exploding themselves and creating wildfires. So these, again, air and noise pollution disproportionately harm environmental justice communities that already suffer from significant health disparities. And thirdly, burning methane is burning fossil fuels themselves cause almost 20% of deaths worldwide from air pollution. But it also, burning methane warms the climate. And in a joint statement from more than 200 medical journals, health professionals have declared that global warming is the single greatest threat to public health. So based on health harms alone, I urge FERC to deny this permit. Thank you for allowing me to comment.
Hello again. A little bit of technical difficulty back here, but we good. So next up, we have Tom and Diana, because we got them on as panelists. So thank you so much for sticking with us, and take it away.
Okay, so my name is Tom Gordon. The proposed GTN expansion is not needed. In fact, the present line could carry double what it does now. While gas use in Washington and Oregon has gone up a bit, in California use has gone down, and for the 3 states, it's gone down in total. The Rocky Mountain Institute, with contributions of the staff of the Southern California Edison, Sacramento Municipal Utility District, and the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power states, quote, and because utility gas customers are typically on the hook for infrastructure and for investments, it's these customers who will bear the costs, either for a continued increase in long-term pipe replacement needs or of attempts to accelerate new investment programs, unquote. The Texas PIRG Education Fund Environment Texas Research and Policy Center concludes, quote, gas is not a clean energy source, especially when its propensity to leak into the atmosphere is taken into account. Methane emissions will pose a strong danger to our environment and accelerate global warming faster than carbon dioxide in the coming decade, unquote. The GTN expansion is not needed, expensive for ratepayers and cheaper for them not to build, and better for the environment not to be built. Thank you. And here's my wife, Diana.
Hi, I'm Diana Gordon, and we live in Washougal, Washington. I'd like to thank you for having this hearing. In my mind, expanding the GTN pipeline from Canada to California is almost like building a new pipeline. We don't have all the heavy construction and pollution, but there will be considerable increase in the gas transported. A new pipeline would be much safer, but TC Energy is not going that route. It probably hopes to avoid some of the problems associated with getting permits from the states and the people that will actually feel the impact of this project. Unfortunately, the existing pipeline has been in operation since 1961, and increasing the pressure to ship more gas is a dangerous idea. Gas, especially methane, can leak from joints and other connections and cause fires and explosions. Natural events like floods and earthquakes damage pipelines as well. This project isn't safe and it isn't needed, and it certainly does not align with the climate goals set by Washington State. Lately, FERC has been encouraged to look more closely at the upstream and downstream effects of the projects it's considering. Climate change, after all, is not going away. As Jennifer Danis of the Sabin Center for Climate Change Law said, FERC needs to act really quickly to prevent both additional new capacity from coming online that isn't needed, and also to preclude the companies who see the writing on the wall about which way the system is moving from trying to game the system. I hope this project will get the scrutiny it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom and Diana. And so Lois, I hope you're there and ready, and we can't wait to hear from you. In the meantime, I'm going to say the next 3 people that will be coming up after Lois finishes, and that's Linnea Scott, Steve Knudsen, and Rajwanti Robinson. And so y'all can get ready. And in the meantime, here's to you, Lois.
Hello, everyone. What a wonderful turnout. So I'm Lois Heffler. I'm retired. I live in Medford, Oregon, and I'm very much in opposition to the GTN XPress proposal. The pipeline expansion from TC Energy to increase the volume of frac gas by 150 million cubic feet per day through the gas transmission Northwest GTN pipeline. This project would increase emissions in the Northwest, which directly conflict with climate and emission goals set by Oregon. Additionally, increasing the flow of fracked gas through an aging pipeline increases the risk of leaks and explosions in wildfire-prone areas. In the Rogue Valley, which is where I live, and locally, in Western Oregon, communities are already feeling the impact of higher temperatures in general, heat domes, drought, wildfires, and wildfire smoke from wildfires in the valley and in the surrounding areas. The Rogue Valley, because of its topography, already has regular long-lasting air inversions. These trap particles in the air and make the air quality in Medford and Grants Pass among the worst in the United States, as listed by the American Lung Association in 2017. Adding frac gas leak-produced emissions to what is already a problematic air quality would exacerbate the current breathing problems, especially for people who work outside, like farm workers and construction workers. These considerations are important and critical, and I hope that FERC considers what we have chosen to tell them about the dangers of this pipeline and increasing the volume of the gas through it. We don't need more fracked gas in Oregon. Thank you, and that's it for me. On
Thank
to the
you.
next one.
Thank you for those very wise words, Lois. I think most people here agree with you. I think everybody here agrees with you. Okay, so we're going to have next Linnea Scott, Steve Knutson, and Rajwanti Robinson. And so Linnea, if you're ready to go, I think we're ready to have you. Hey.
Hi, my name is Linnea Scott, and I am a lifelong Seattle resident living on Duwamish land. I'm a volunteer with 350 Seattle, and I am here to oppose the GTN XPress pipeline. Scientists have made it clear that a livable future is only possible if humans drastically reduce their fossil fuel use as quickly as possible. In the past few years, Washingtonians such as me have elected leaders who are enacting meaningful legislation with concrete climate goals, such as the 2021 Washington Climate Commitment Act, which sets the path for Washington to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. So it is incredibly frustrating that FERC would move towards approving a pipeline expansion without clear and direct engagement with the public. We have heard so many reasons tonight how the GTN XPress will negatively affect the people of the Pacific Northwest. Personally, I am the mother of an 8-month-old. I fight for a fossil fuel-free world every day because I dream of a safe and healthy future for my daughter and every child across the globe. I want my daughter to grow up and have the opportunity to dream about a beautiful future for her own children, should she choose to have them. Expanding the GTN pipeline is incompatible with this vision of the future. FERC, for the future of my children and all children, please deny the GTN XPress project.
Thank you, Linnea, and thank you for carrying all that emotion that so much of us feel. So is Steve Knutson here? You ready to go? Hi, Steve, welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. My name is Steve Knutson, and I'm a lifelong resident of Oregon and recently retired after a 40-year career in the Pacific Northwest energy industry. In the interest of full disclosure, I do acknowledge that I was employed by Gas Transmission Northwest from 1995 to 2002. I'm commenting today to express my objections to the policies and actions of the Oregon Department of Energy, PGE, Pacificor, Umatilla Electric Co-op, Idaho Power, and the Oregon Public Utility Commission in promoting the expanded development of natural gas-fired generation in the Boardman area. I also object to the simultaneous development of the Boardman to Hemingway 500 kV transmission line, an unneeded 300-mile transmission line to be constructed almost entirely in virgin right-of-way, and it's designed to support expanded gas-fired generation in the Boardman area while expanding the export of clean energy from the Pacific Northwest to Idaho and points further east. While I hope the TransCanada Pipelines does not proceed with the planned expansion of their pipeline as currently configured, I believe that narrow attempts to coerce FERC into rejecting the pipeline expansion would be misplaced. TCP does not build pipelines on speculation, but is required by FERC rules to have binding long-term contracts or precedent agreements for the full capacity of any pipeline expansion. FERC is responsible to approve pipeline expansions when FERC's rules are satisfied. I don't believe FERC should be pilloried for doing its job, although I don't think they are doing it well in this instance. The Oregon Department of Energy has been actively promoting the expansion of energy infrastructure in the Boardman area since 2015. The Department of Energy has been advising local agencies and energy interests on how to avoid Energy Facilities Siting Council jurisdiction, as well as how to evade FERC oversight of electric transmission. This GTN Express mainline expansion is the second of two interrelated pipeline expansions. The first expansion was approved by FERC last year and was for adding a compressor station to PGE's Coyote Springs lateral at the southeast corner of the Bombing Range Road. Although the application claimed it was just to support pressures on the Coyote Springs lateral, we now know it was at least partially supported by the data center agreements to build giant natural gas fuel cells. Furthermore, it appears that the Coyote Springs compressor station was sized to support the construction of a very large new gas-fired generator in the middle of PGE's Wheatfield Renewable Wind Solar Facility. This gas-fired generator will apparently skirt any limitation on new gas-fired generation in Oregon by blending a small amount of hydrogen into the combustion fuel, thereby qualifying as high-efficiency cogeneration, which doesn't need an FSEC site certificate, regardless of how large. A hydrogen injection facility has already given notice of its plans to the Morrow County Planning Department. My plea to the Oregon Attorney General and the Senator is to focus on the real reason for the TCP pipeline expansion, which is market demand for new expanded gas-fired generation in response to massive data center load growth and the very profitable energy sales to those data centers. To hide this new data center load growth, utilities and wholesale generators have been sleeving their power sales to data centers through Umatilla Electric Co-op, a tactic pioneered by Enron. 5 years ago, Little Umatilla Electric Co-op had negligible carbon emissions from their system. By 2021, Umatilla Electric Co-op was the third largest CO2 emitting utility in Oregon at over 2 million tons a year.
Mr. Knudsen, we
Yes.
love hearing what you have to say. And oh my God, so much fascinating information. But if you could wrap it up, that would be really great.
Okay.
Because it's been about.
If parties really care about the climate, they should make every effort to insist that TCP install electric compression for all pipeline expansions or compressor replacements. Something is wrong when TCP can build a brand new compressor station like Coyote Springs in the middle of the largest renewable resource facility in the Northwest, Wheat Ridge, yet they are allowed to employ gas compression instead of electric compression. This is a genuine failure of public policy and sensible regulation for which FERC should be held accountable. Furthermore, the EIS for GTN Express is deeply and fatally flawed because it concludes that switching to electric compression would actually increase CO2 emissions by 25% compared to the CO2 emissions resulting from adding new simple cycle natural gas pipeline compression. This is blatant disinformation and apparently assumes that electricity supplied to TCP
Hey, Steve.
supplied by heavily coal-based utility. This devious assumption alone should be enough to impeach the EIS. Thank you for affording me this opportunity to comment. I yield to the next commenter.
Thank you so much. That was so much information. Fascinating. So one thing you all might know, or not know, is that we actually, a whole bunch of us are on Zoom, but there are some people in person in the Rogue Valley. So we are going to have some speakers from that Rogue Valley gathering. Up are Kathleen, Jess, and Maggie. So take it away. We think this is going to work. It's new technology. Maybe. I don't know what you think. While we check on what's happening in the Rogue Valley, let's get Rich Voget. I'm so sorry if I messed up your name. Rich, Melanie Plout, and Mark Creeman. You're going to be the next three up. So we'll check to see whether the Rogue Valley is ready. And if not, maybe we should just go right on to you if you're ready to go. What do you think, Rogue Valley? Anybody got any news?
Hi, hello everybody.
Hi.
Hi. Hey, tech support, can you unmute our other account real quick? We got a whole testimony zone set up.
What's the other account called, Hannah? I'm not finding it.
One second.
Just so everybody knows. On camera then was Hannah Soul, the Executive Director of Road Climate. Woo! Thanks, Hannah, and hi, everybody.
It's called Road Climate Watch Party, Phoenix, Oregon.
Just kidding, that's wrong.
Okay, you know what? We're good. Hold on one second. We are almost.
Woo! All right,
ready.
so Rich, you'll be on in a few minutes after Kathleen, Jess, and Maggie. And after Rich will come Melanie and Mark.
Hey, okay, you're on. Hello, my name is Kathleen Herring, otherwise known as Kay. I am living in Phoenix, Oregon, on the lands of the Takelma, Shasta, and Lagawa. I strongly oppose the GNP pipeline for many reasons. I am submitting comments as a retired healthcare professional. I am very concerned about the impact of this project with the increased amount of gas that will be flowing through, doubling the amount of admissions, increasing respiratory diseases, and also water quality of all the surrounding areas. These are things that are not easily remediated, and leaks happen all the time. You cannot mitigate those. So you really, instead of permitting more, we should be eliminating the pipeline. Thank you.
Awesome. Jess, you coming?
Oh, you're up. Go ahead, Maggie.
Oh. Hi, Maggie.
Yeah, Maggie.
Am I standing in the right place?
Yep.
You're great.
Well, I don't have a lot of deep technical information like Steve did. I'm going with my gut, and that is that I'm a grandparent, and a lot of kids, i.e. my grandkids' friends. And we spend so much time in the Rogue Valley here wearing masks, not just from COVID, but we have to wear masks in the summer when there's smoke from fires. And, we don't need an accelerant pipeline going down through our favorite forests in Oregon, to blow a fire up into an extreme firestorm. That already happens all by itself. We have to wear masks when it gets the air just gets nasty from inversions. It's just not as great a place to live when you can't breathe fresh air. And I really want my grandchildren to be able to stay here if they choose and have families and raise their children so that indoor is not where you have to stay all the time. So that's all I have to say. I think it's just really important.
Yes, I think it's important too. We all do. Thank you, Maggie. And Jess, you there?
Yes, here I am. Hello.
Hi, Jess.
Hi, my name is Jess Thompson. I am a nurse and I work in Medford, Oregon. And I've been living in the Rogue Valley for about 10 years now. I've made this beautiful place my home. And there are two reasons that I oppose this pipeline expansion. One is just like Maggie said, the smoke here is starting to make this place very difficult to live. I used to run life support on COVID patients. I worked in the ICU for 5 years and I developed asthma over it. And now that there's so much smoke and I've had this lung injury, I wonder if I can keep living here as it gets worse and worse. And I think that many places around the West are starting to really feel the impacts of climate change. And so it is time for us to divest from our fossil fuel infrastructure. We need to change this now before it gets worse. I may need to move my home over it, but I hope that that doesn't mean that for everyone here. Another thing I want to speak to is the health impact of fossil fuels. We say in healthcare that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And we know that natural gas
contains carcinogens. We know that it can cause asthma, and I can tell you firsthand it is no fun, but you know what is worse is having your child have asthma. And children, because of their size, because they breathe more for their size, will uptake more toxins from their environment than adults. And so they're much more affected at a time when their brains are developing, when their bodies are developing. And so we are much more likely to see birth defects. We're much more likely to see childhood diseases and things that really impact whole families, affecting people in our communities who live in rural places, who have the least resources, the least access to healthcare and help. And that's really going to be devastating. So to the extent that we are going to have volatile leaks out of these pipelines, if we increase the amount of gas, we know we're increasing the amount of off-gassing from these pipelines, and every community downwind is going to be impacted. So I just want to speak up for that, because I'm the one holding their hands when it gets so bad they're in the hospital, but let's not make it that way.
Excellent work. And we totally agree with you. Thank you so much from the Rogue Valley. Okay. Thanks, Hannah. Next up, if you're ready, Rich Voget. Again, I'm so sorry if I'm messing up your name. And then after that will be Melanie Plout. And then we're going to have some in-person, also gathered in person, or some people from Wild Idaho Rising Tide. So we'll hear from them after Rich and Melanie. Thank you so much, Rich.
I don't hear Rich. This is Melanie. Do you want me to go ahead?
You hit it, Melanie. Good idea.
Okay. So I'm Melanie Plout. I'm a retired OBGYN physician, and I'm living in Portland, Oregon. Whenever one is considering a project, there are always risks and benefits to weigh. Others have spoken very movingly about the risks, and I want to address the potential possible benefits of expanding this pipeline. So we need to ask ourselves, do we really need this increase in gas capacity? And I would argue, no, we absolutely do not, for the following reasons. Number one, the current GTN pipeline already has a capacity for more gas than is currently being used. Number two, regulations in Oregon and Washington require electricity generation to get cleaner and cleaner over the next 20 to 25 years. So we do not need the gas to generate electricity. Number three, even the gas industry, Northwest Natural, in their most recently proposed IRP, which is the planning document for the next 20 to 30 years, looks for a likelihood of a decreased load when they average all of their possible scenarios. This is due to likely electrification and an estimated 20% decrease in heating degree days by 2050 because of global warming. So we don't need gas for direct use in our homes. In fact, Northwest Natural estimates that by 2050, it is possible that gas needs could possibly decrease to only 10% of current use. And this IRP was written before the Inflation Reduction Act created financial incentives for building electrification, and before a media flurry helped inform the general public about the health risks of burning methane in the home to cook. The bottom line is we don't need it, we don't want it, it's not in the public interest, and there is no reason for it to be approved. Thank you, FERC, for denying this certificate.
Well done, and thank you for your wise words, Melanie. Is Rich here yet? Are we able to find Rich? I'm hoping. Okay, so Rich, if you're here, be in touch. And in the meantime, we're going to go to Wild Idaho Rising Tide. And I don't know who the person is who's going to be testifying from Wild Idaho Rising Tide. I welcome you, and I hope you'll introduce yourself. Oh, hi, Helen.
Hi.
Go ahead and introduce yourself. We recognize you from the video.
All right, thank you. I'm Helen Yost of Wild Idaho Rising Tide, and I'm speaking on behalf of at least 3,200 members of our direct action climate activist group. And we would just like to address a few issues that we're concerned about, as besides the climate change that GTN XPress would impose with its stranded Canadian gas assets on the folks all across the Northwest. Of course, before the harms of climate change come about from combustion and leaking of methane from this fossil fuel system, there are also harms borne by the local communities throughout the pipeline route. Some of those harms here in the North Idaho and Sandpoint area are that this pipeline proceeds directly under one of the main economic engines of our tourism and recreation industry. And that is a major parking lot at the base of the Schweitzer Ski Resort, where everyone parks their vehicles and takes the shuttle bus up the road. So if there was ever an accident along that pipeline, there's a small substation right there, you know, a lot of folks would lose their vehicles. And then the pipeline also proceeds near parking lots for hiking areas up into the woods west of town. It goes under the Pend Oreille River, and pipelines, by the way, generate heat. You can see where pipelines, gas and oil, are in the Northern Rockies because the snow has melted over them. This pipeline generates heat under the Pend Oreille River, which impacts fish populations. If there was ever an explosion or a leak in that river just downstream from our second economic engine here in the Sandpoint area, which is Lake Pend Oreille, that fossil fuels leak would impact everything downstream, including the fish and livelihoods of the Kalispel tribe about 30 miles downstream. So we're very concerned about those issues, and of course the release of more fossil fuel emissions into the Northwest climate. Of course, last summer, Idaho experienced the greatest number of wildfires of anywhere in the Northwest, and that number is bound to increase as the climate heats up. I'm sure I'm missing lots of other concerns. We do know from our research, and we have, you know, submitted these concerns previously in our comments, that there have been 3 major incidents of GTN XPress pipeline leaks just in the last decade in North Idaho and in the eastern Washington Spokane area. So we are very eager to work with folks throughout the rest of the Northwest, as our politicians here in Idaho, namely our governor and our entire congressional delegation, of course, submitted comments to FERC saying that they were all for this added gas because, hey, Idaho is one of the fastest growing states in the region, in the nation right now. Those folks do not represent the interests and the concerns of most Idahoans who, whether they are Republican, Democrat, or Republican in name only, are, as a majority, concerned about climate change and recognize the fact that almost 80% of climate change is generated by fossil fuels. So we are asking the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, to please deny a certificate of convenience and necessity for the GTN XPress. And you'll be hearing from us. You know, when politicians, local and state, don't listen to our concerns, we'll be staging plenty of protests, hopefully with comrades across the Northwest. So thank you for this opportunity to comment. And we're looking forward to working with all of you in the future.
Thank you, Helen, Wild Idaho Rising Tide. Helen, you do such great work. Okay, so I'm going to give you the next 3 names that of people who are going to speak, and that's Mary Fleischman, G. Gerst, and Carol Elwood. But we do have, probably even after those people, we have a little more time. So if you want to testify, now's a chance. It's easy. Strike while the iron's hot. Take a couple of minutes, speak from your own experience. You don't have to have something prepared, and you know what you believe. And if you just want to share it with FERC for a couple of minutes, now's your chance. So think about that. And in the meanwhile, hey, Mary, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
I'm here on a personal level, but also I represent the Central Oregon Bitterbrush Broads. We're with the Great Old Broads for Wilderness. So one of our biggest concerns is the impact on wildlife corridors and so forth. And I'm very disappointed that FERC did not have a more open public comment period on this, and we were very engaged with the Jordan Cove situation, and it looks like it's one of those again. So anyways, I live, so the process is, in my opinion, is just totally wrong. I live within 3 blocks from where there is that pipeline, and right now there's new development there for new houses and so forth, and there'll be playgrounds, and there'll be hike trails, and again, we're looking at wildlife corridors. I'm sorry, that's just too close for my comfort zone. But again, Oregon already has set rules in regards to trying to decrease fossil fuel use and deal with the climate change. And so very disappointed in this. And I also would like to say that I totally agree with Steve with the Hemming I can't see it, Boardman situation, because I've been on top of that one too. But no, we really want to see this denied. The fact that there hasn't been a whole lot of public input in the impacts being shared with everybody, this is not okay. You can't just push this stuff through, and especially given everything that's going on with climate change, drought, fires, the growth of different communities and so forth. This should not be pushed through. I thank you.
Thank you for speaking up and saying such wise things. Okay, G. Gerst, are you here to talk to FERC?
Hello,
Hi.
here I am. I'll wait till it clicks in. Am I audible?
You're very audible, and there's a beautiful
good.
picture of a lake.
Thanks. I am Gary Gerst. I'm in Olympia, Washington, and I speak today on behalf of my grandchildren and also all my friends who are members of indigenous tribes. And I speak as a history teacher, not a scientist. First of all, I want to say that this is classic case of privatizing profits and socializing the consequences. And I just want to shout from the roof, what the FERC, you know, regulatory commission is to regulate the energy sector, not regulate testimonial access by those affected by the energy sector. And throughout American history, we all know that tobacco lied, oil lied, and they exploit. That's all there is to it. In short, I would say FERC acts like it's owned by the oil and gas sector, not by we the people that fund them. They are there to regulate on our behalf, not keep us from the discussion. And why, I have a question, rhetorical. Why are the best case facts or theories allowed in as evidence by the gas sector and not the stats given by those scientists who know what the worst case facts will be and the experience by those who've been affected by it over the 100 years? Why do we not require that they submit the worst case scenario? And that's my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you for that beautiful picture. Next up will be Carol Elwood. And Carol, while you're checking in and coming on screen, after that, we'll have 3 more people who will be giving their testimony to FERC. That's Freddie Finney Jorday or Jordet. Again, I apologize if I'm saying your name wrong. Noelle Nelson and Ashley Lindell. So thank you very much. Hi, Carol.
Hi. Thanks for the opportunity. I oppose expansion of the GTN XPress pipeline because doing so would increase the severity and inevitability of leaks, which are incompatible with humans and other life forms living here. I live in Bend, Oregon, on the site of town where the pipeline expansion is proposed. My home is also on planet Earth, miraculously positioned not too close and not too far from the sun, spinning and seasonally tilting such that many forms of life have been able to flourish. When fossil fuels are extracted, transported, refined, and burned, there is inevitable degradation to our soil, water, air, atmosphere every step along the way. Those who invest in and profit from these processes are not paying full cost for the messes they make. Those costs are borne by all of us, but disproportionately by marginalized people, low income and BIPOC people who live in closest proximity to the sources of pollution. The costs will be borne by young people not yet eligible to vote and by generations yet to be born. This is morally wrong. If producers of fossil fuel were fully financially responsible for every life-endangering aspect of their processes, the profit balance would tip toward making investment in renewable energy the smarter economic choice. We already know it's the right choice for our environmental and for the environment and all life that depends on it. It would be unconscionable to permit expansion of this pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. Okay, next up, I hope if we gave Freddie time to get ready. There you are. Hi, thank you. Hit it.
All right, hello. My name is Freddie Finney-Jordet. I am a youth climate activist in Bend and part of a coalition of youth climate activists here in Central Oregon that are working to stop this pipeline and in general help the climate. I've been a climate activist for a couple of years, since sometime in high school, and frankly, my voice is getting kind of tired. The GTN XPress project would create 3.47 million additional tons of greenhouse gases per year, despite a environmental impact statement that said otherwise, which has been proven to be false again and again. We'll know that. Even the consideration of further investment in the fossil fuels that are currently killing us feels to me like nothing short of absolute betrayal and a violation of the social contract. While the climate crisis is currently impacting people, my generation will face especially devastating effects like drought and wildfire and severe weather events and so on. In summation, to the FERC, I would like to live to see old age before dying of climate catastrophe, and I feel like that is not an unreasonable request. So please grant that for me. Thank you.
I don't think that's an unreasonable request at all. And I hope we're all successful in working together. I know we will be, to grant that request to you, and keep up the good work. So next we have up is Noel Nelson. Noel, are you here? Hi, nice to see you, and hit it. Oh, I think you're if you could unmute, something I have forgotten to do like 40 times tonight. So take your time.
Did that fix it?
Yeah.
Okay, it picked the wrong sound driver. My apologies. Technical stuff. So anyway, I'm Noel Nelson. I'm a resident of Redmond, Oregon, and so many people from Native Americans to other residents of other communities and cities have just talked about all the direct pollution and health effects that this will have. I absolutely oppose the GTN XPress pipeline and urge FERC to deny the permit. But I want to also present something that hasn't been said. I say some of the climate change effects are already here. It's not, the can cannot be kicked any further down the road. Drought, that I asked my father, I grew up in Eastern Oregon, right? You know, the high desert, we're expected to be dry. Wildfires are normal, lightning happens, but massive firestorms were not part of my climate out there. I saw my home childhood neighborhood burn up in the Canyon Creek complex fire. I was worried for my, my father and losing his home during that time. We went over there as the evacuation lifted, and I could still see the smoke. It looked like night during day as the creeping ashes or smoke was trailing the hills, and the coals were still alive, and rubble from so many neighbors' houses. It was nightmarish. My father's house survived, thankfully, my childhood home, but it was only of a third of the ones that did. 60 plus homes were burned to the ground, and most of them did not rebuild. It was catastrophic. And there's a lot of local ire over what the firefighters should have done or should not have done. But I will say that persistent, just look at the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute from Oregon State University, their 5th climate change or Oregon climate assessment shows that over 50% of the state of Oregon has been in drought over the last 20 years. I'd say it's not an anomaly anymore. They say their models also show 50% could be attributed to climate change. So it's pretty hard to argue this is an anomaly anymore. Climate change, the devastation is here and it's only going to get worse. It's time to act, not expand not expand carbon emissions, reduce carbon emissions, deny this expansion.
Thank you very much, wise words. And my heart travels with the trauma that you and that community experienced and continues to experience. All of us, of course, do. The stories, the reality is a lot. So next up, we're going to have Ashley Lindell, and I see you right there. I'm so excited. And just to give Tamsin Taylor and Diane Hodiak a heads up that after Ashley is done, we will hear their testimony. So thank you, Ashley.
Hi, my name is Ashley Lindell. I live in Seattle, Washington, and I'm a family practice doctor. I strongly oppose the GTN XPress proposed project. First of all, this project is unnecessary. The Attorneys General of Washington, California, and Oregon have all submitted detailed arguments for highlighting the lack of need for the project in a region which is actively working to reduce use of fossil fuels. Secondly, this project is dangerous. Air pollution from burning fossil fuels is responsible for approximately 1 in 5 deaths worldwide. By FERC's own estimate, this project would result in 3.24 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually, driving climate change. Climate change has measurable health impacts, which we are seeing already, and which will increase as average global temperatures rise. This is, of course, a fracked gas pipeline. Studies have tied living near fracking sites to increased risk of health issues, including birth defects, asthma, and certain cancers. And of course, pushing more gas through an aging pipeline increases safety risks. TC Energy's Keystone Pipeline ruptured recently, resulting in an approximately 600,000 gallon oil spill. This is an unnecessary project with numerous risks and negative impacts on public health. It should not be approved. That's my testimony. Thank you.
And that is very valuable testimony. Thank you so much. And you are so right. Tamsin Taylor, there you are. Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for jumping in. All right, here you go.
Others have been so eloquent about the various concerns. And FERC is generally known as being captive of the fossil fuel industry. But FERC, you did the right thing with the LNG situation. All of those issues, these issues are also true with the GTN. Could you see that? Okay. I was putting up a map of all of the problems with the LNG pipeline. They're all true of the GTN XPress. And without repeating all of that, it's also, again, quite stupid. Just on the ground, Electrify Ashland is encouraging so many people. I gave up my gas stove and I now have induction. And I have to tell you, cooking with gas doesn't cut it. Induction is better.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for stepping in. And I look forward to someday having an induction oven. And now you're going to make it even faster that I do that. Okay, so last up for now, Diane Hodiak. Y'all ready? Oh, there you are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's been so much already. I'm going to try to skip over a couple of new points. I'm Diane Hodiak, and our organization 350 Deschutes is a nonprofit that represents around 2,000 people across Central Oregon. Without question, we are against this pipeline expansion. FERC must not make a reckless decision to approve the expansion. Instead, it must listen to the many individuals who are resolute in stopping it. The social cost of carbon by TC Energy's own admission and probably understated, according to the EPA. This cost of carbon is $12 billion. That is what Oregonians and others will pay for the social cost of releasing this climate-destroying pollution from fossil gas into the atmosphere. We Oregonians and other states from which this pipeline travels will pay for a project we neither want or need. We will pay with our lives, increased intensity of wildfires, extreme weather, including drought. From farmers to fisher people, businesses, and underserved communities, everyone will suffer from food insecurity and other impacts. What about the two new proposed subdivisions in Bend through which this pipeline will travel? They are but two among many subdivision homes and schools that are within the unsafe blast, fire, or leakage zone that is a threat to life and property when you live in close proximity to a pipeline. Imagine your bedroom in said subdivision within feet of a pipeline that could fail due to increasing volumes. In fact, may be likely to fail given other instances of this. Imagine the children contracting asthma. Nearly everyone will suffer if FERC approves this expansion. The list goes on. One must ask, given all the compelling reasons not to approve this expansion and the weak evidence to support it, we ask that FERC stop the expansion in the total length of this pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And I think they should listen to you. I think FERC should listen to you, as we all have, because everyone has said so many wise things. And I think that is our testimony for tonight, unless someone jumps up with a hand, but we are so on time. Thank you for speaking with such clarity and passion and making everything work so well. So I'm going to move us into the closing minutes, if that's okay. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Thank you to our many speakers, to the water and land defenders who've been fighting fossil fuel projects like this in the Northwest for years, for decades. Thank you to everyone who has sent an email or signed a petition or otherwise taken action to oppose GTN XPress so far. Even just talking to your neighbors, talking to your family, talking to your friends, talking to teachers and business owners and everybody. In a short amount of time, our communities have come together and put up a major fight, and that is great. But we're not going to stop now because we got to make sure we get this done. Okay, so next steps. If you would like to stay updated on GTN XPress and find more ways to take action, please fill out this form that is being shared in the chat with your information and email address. There is also a question on this form where you can ask for more information on how to give your video testimony for FERC if you decided tonight wasn't the time, but you're ready to do it some other day. That is, if you didn't get a chance to do it tonight. And then, of course, there are other ways you can take action, like writing a letter to the editor or submitting written comments. The list goes on, and everything you do is so important. And everything you do is seen by so many of us who are on your side, who are fighting with you, who believe in the possibilities of a healthier and better future. So let me say again, from all the individuals and organizations who are working on this issue, to all of you who care about it so much, you are all amazing, and we can't wait to see you again and again as we keep making our world a better one. Thank you and good night.